Hello everyone, today is 12th of April, now it's 8:30 in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for the day in which I'll share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. Second update will be a little late this evening on my Patreon page, and in between their updates I will publish headlines on both channels, on Rumble and YouTube. And headlines, of course, is a short summary of the news that I will present during that second update on my Patreon. That's been said, let's talk about news now. And first of all, short summary of the situation on Ukrainian battlefield. According to reports from Russian media, from Russian military channels, there was no crucial changes on any of the sectors of the front line. Russian armed forces increasing pressure on Ukrainian units all along the line of contact, and I will share with you some important information about some important developments. For example, yesterday Russian media reported about neutralized Ukrainian special forces unit in Kherson region. To be more precise, in this area, Tendrovsky Spit. And according to reports, Russian FSB, Federal Security Service, and Russian Defense Ministry tracked movement of Ukrainian sabotage group that was trained, by the way, by British special forces, and this operation entirely was planned by British military personnel. Well, this unit of Ukrainian special forces was neutralized. All members of that unit was killed, one was captured, and during the interrogation, this POW, Ukrainian POW, shared information about their task, share information that they have been trained in United Kingdom. He said exact locations where that training was carried out, and also according to that POW, this sabotage operation was planned by British officers that are overlooking basically all the military operations of Ukraine special forces in the on the southern sectors of the front line, and also when it comes to maritime drone operations and the landing operations. So we have confirmation basically from POWs about direct British involvement in this conflict. At some point, I'm quite sure Russian side will present to public British POWs. Many of them, hundreds of British military personnel have already been killed in Ukraine, and I believe it will not take long before Russian side will present British officers of British intelligence, British special forces that have been captured on the line of contact. Anyway, let's continue. Also interesting report, interesting development in Vremovsky salient area, which is of course the South Donetsk sector. According to several military channels, Russian forces conducted local-scale offensive operation in direction of Urozhaine and established control over the first strongholds of Kiev regime forces in this area. If you remember, a few days ago, I was reporting about increased shelling of Ukrainian positions in Urozhaine and Staromayorskaya directions. And I guess that was artillery preparation of the upcoming intensification of Russian operations in this area. And now we have reports about initial clashes in Urozhaine direction. Soon we will hear about clashes in Staromayorskaya direction also. We did not receive any reports on Novomikhailivka. Russian forces continue to destroy Ukrainian positions in western side of Novomikhailivka with long-range artillery and airstrikes, but this village is still split between the sides. Also interesting developments in Avdiivka direction, by the way. Where is the Avdiivka? So this is Avdiivka direction. According to reports from several sources, Russian units entered the Umanskaya settlement and establish positions on outskirts of Umanskaya. This was expected because if you remember yesterday in first update, I reported about Russian local scale offensive operations from Toninka area towards Yasnobrodovka and Umanskaya, and yesterday evening reports start coming in that forward units of Russian armed forces already are in Umanskaya. I was expecting a pincer movement from Russian side there. I was expecting an additional Russian offensive from Orlovka, Semyonovka areas towards Umanskaya, but at this point we didn't hear anything about that. But seems like Russian offensive from Toninka was strong enough to continue progress, to continue advances towards Umanskaya. Or maybe we will see this additional offensive, local scale offensive from Orlovka today or in upcoming days. Also interesting developments happening on the northern side of Avdiivka direction, northern flank. Russian armed forces conducting operations towards Novokalinovo and from two directions, and according to military channels, forward units of Russian armed forces entered village of Novokalinovo and established control over the southern areas of this village. So battle for the settlement has begun, we may say. Also, when it comes to Chisovyar direction, we had reports that Russian armed forces continue their progress, continue their advances in Bogdanovka, Kalinina area from Ivanovskoye or Krasnaya area, and on my Telegram today I shared video on which you can see Ukrainian POWs that were captured exactly in Chisovyar direction. Many military experts are reporting about significant deterioration of battle capabilities of Kiev regime forces. Some military experts are going as far as to say that Kiev regime forces are on the brink of collapse already. Let's see, time will tell, of course. Also, Russian forces continue to increase pressure on Ukrainian units in Seversk direction. And main hotspot is, of course, Belogorovka and surrounding areas. By the way, of course, many of you know about Terny village, situation around Terny village, which is Kupiansk sector of the front line, most southern part of Kupiansk sector, and this village is bordering Yampolovka settlement, far on the left bank of the Zhiribets river. And in previous days there was reports on number of channels about somewhat unsuccessful Russian local scale offensive operations towards Terny. Some channels were even reporting that Kiev regime forces in this area will probably regain initiative and will conduct offensive operations on their own and will push Russian forces back. I was skeptical of that. I did not believe, and I still don't believe, that Kiev regime forces are able or capable of regaining initiative on any direction. And yesterday late evening, several military channels start reporting about Russian offensives towards Terny once again. So initiative definitely is in Russian hands. Maybe there was some relatively unsuccessful Russian reckoning force operation or even local scale offensive in direction of Terny, but that don't means that Kiev regime forces suddenly regain initiative. No. This is a large-scale military operation, and not every reckoning force operation or every local-scale offensive goes according to plan. This is not a movie. This is real battles, and just because one Russian local-scale offensive did not go as planned, maybe according to some reports, that definitely don't mean that Kiev regime forces will have upper hand now in that direction. It's not happening, and as I said, I was skeptical about capabilities of Kiev regime forces. I'm still skeptical, and now military channels are reporting about additional Russian offensives in this area. And according to Slaviangrad, I believe, Russian forces advanced 1.5 kilometers towards Terni. And well, this is it when it comes to short summary of the situation on Ukrainian battlefield. During the nighttime, Russian armed forces conducted drone strikes on concentrations of Kyiv regime forces, Kyiv regime's military and logistics infrastructure in Kryvyi Rog direction, several other directions also, and I will share my opinion on topic of so-called Kharkov offensive. Last couple of weeks, I will say, almost all channels are talking about upcoming Russian large-scale offensive operations towards Kharkov, towards Sumy, towards Chernigov. I'm monitoring situation, and I'm gonna be direct, by the way. I find it difficult to understand these channels, big channels, by the way, are coming from, because in my personal opinion, there is no need to conduct any large-scale offensive operations at this point on the Russian part. I mean, why would Russia conduct large-scale offensives right now? It does not make any sense to me personally, but yet again, I'm no military person, so how should I know? But I'm just sharing my opinion. And well, in my reading of the big picture, Russian forces may conduct some local-scale offensives to create some buffer zone in Kharkov, Chernigov, Sumy region. Maybe, but I'm extremely skeptical that Russian side will conduct offensive towards Kharkov, for example, towards Sumy or Chernigov to establish control over these cities and surrounding areas. And I'm skeptical of such a possibility, because I don't see a reason why should the Russian side conduct such operations right now. It will make sense. For Russian forces to continue demilitarizing Kyiv regime forces on current line of contact as long as it takes, and force Kyiv regime, basically, first of all, force Kyiv regime forces to end up on the verge of collapse, or maybe even collapsed, and then simultaneously force Kyiv regime to capitulate. And once Kyiv regime will capitulate, then it does make all sense for Russian side to conduct large-scale offensive operations, because there will be no more resistance, at least on a significant scale. Of course, some Ukrainian neo-Nazi units may not obey orders from capitulated Kyiv and continue their terrorist activity, but Ukraine's armed forces in large will lay down arms and will no longer fight. And exactly at that time, after capitulation of Kyiv regime, Russian forces probably will move forward and establish control over the Russian territories, historical Russian territories. Kharkov region, Chernigov region, Sumy region, Nikolaev, Odessa, rest of it. Kyiv, by the way, I hope Kyiv also, because Kyiv is of course Russian city, and I don't see any reason why should Moscow ever agree that Kyiv and surrounding areas there will remain as a landlocked quasi-state on the political map. It does not make any sense. But in any case, at this point, before total collapse of Kyiv regime forces it did not yet happen, I don't see any reason, any logic to conduct large-scale offensives in any direction, by the way. Kharkov, Chernigov, Sumy, Kherson, or whichever. That's my take, by the way, because I don't know. Day in, day out, all the military channels, all the other channels, by the way, media channels, are reporting about this upcoming Russian offensive, and I'm watching this and I'm wondering, these guys are coming from, man. What offensive? Why? I mean, every step militaries take is based on serious calculations and analytics, and right now large-scale offensive does not make any sense whatsoever. When Ukrainian armed forces will collapse, then yes, and I was saying this for forever now, When Ukrainian forces will collapse, yes, Russian forces will conduct some decisive operations, because it will, in that case, casualty numbers will be as minimal as possible, and destruction on the ground will be as minimal as possible. But only after Ukrainian armed forces will collapse and Kiev regime will capitulate or will be on the edge of capitulation. But not now. It's just too early yet. And Russian armed forces quite effectively are demilitarizing Kiev regime forces on a line of contact right now as it is. And there is no need to rush. Anyway, this is my take on the situation. But yet again, I'm no military expert, so how should I know? I'm just sharing my opinion. Now let's go through some other news, by the way, and I want to share first of all this report from Vzglyad newspaper about quite interesting and strong statements from permanent representative of Russian Federation in UN, Vasily Nebezhnya, and I want to share with you this video, a short video. Let's listen together.
Ukraine today is nothing more than a private military company fighting for the West using Western weapons, and they're fighting to the last Ukrainian. All that's left for the Kiev regime to do under the circumstances is, in their impotent rage and in the worst terrorist traditions, to deliberately shell peaceful neighborhoods in Russian cities. They're conducting actual terrorist attacks, and this is how the Kiev regime will go down in history, a monstrous, inhumane regime of terrorists and Nazis. A regime that's traded in the interests of its people, sacrificing them in return for Western money and handouts for the benefit of Zelensky and his inner circle. Under these circumstances, attempts of the leader of the Kiev regime to promote his formulae, to convene summits in support of the Kiev regime, provoke nothing but bafflement. Very soon, the only topic at any international meeting on Ukraine will be the unconditional surrender of the Kiev regime. I advise you all to prepare for this in advance. Thank you very much.
So hopefully sound was okay, and you hear what Nebezhnya has to say, and he was quite direct. He was quite direct that very soon only topic for any international meetings on Ukraine will be the unconditional surrender of Kiev regime. That's how it's gonna be, by the way. I completely agree with Nebezhnya and his understanding of the situation, his reading of the big picture. And that's exactly what I was talking about a few minutes ago. When Ukrainian armed forces will collapse, when Kiev regime will be on the verge of capitulation or will capitulate, then and only then it will make all the sense to conduct decisive, final, large-scale operations from Russian forces to establish control over their all the territories of modern Ukraine that will be under Russian control after end of this conflict. And in my understanding, that means establishing control over the entire Ukraine with the exception of Western regions. Because Western regions most likely will become under control of NATO, and very few people here in Russia really will object that, because Western Ukraine hardly by anyone have been seen as a part of Russian world. Western Ukraine is quite different. Western Ukraine is a hotbed of the Ukrainian neo-Nazi ideology, and well, because 70-80% of that part of modern Ukraine used to be part of Poland before Second World War, and most likely Poland will have a claim on these territories and will try to establish control over it. Then okay, let Poland deal now with the Ukrainian neo-Nazis. Let them deal with this issue. But in any case, as I said many times before, in my understanding, Ukraine will be divided after this conflict will end. Western Ukraine will become under NATO control. Most likely, Poland, Hungary, and Romania will claim their former territories. Although there is a slight chance that maybe Washington and London will insist Western Ukraine to remain as a as a quasi-state under the name of Ukraine, to use it against Russia for decades to come. That's theoretically that's possible, and also there is a slight chance that Kyiv and surrounding areas may remain on the political map as a landlocked state, Ukraine. I said about this also quite a number of times, but I don't see why would Moscow ever agree on that, not to establish full direct control over the Kyiv and the surrounding areas. But in any case, only time will tell, by the way, only time will tell. And well, let's continue with some additional news now. RT is reporting that Ukrainian MPs vote to force Kyiv regime forces to keep fighting. Ukrainian so-called parliament has voted against demobilizing the country's longest-serving conscripts, forcing them to stay on the front line indefinitely. So if you remember several weeks ago even, there was talks in Ukraine about demobilization of some 300,000 military personnel, and many were skeptical that this is going to be the case, and we have reports now that so-called parliament of Ukraine refused to demobilize anybody. They have extreme lack of manpower, and yesterday they voted for mobilization law. So they intend to mobilize even more people, forcefully mobilize even more people. And they will not demobilize nobody. RIA Novosti's report that in Kharkov region, forceful or mandatory evacuation was declared in 47 settlements. Kyiv regime is basically, one may say, is preparing itself for possible Russian offensive, but in Kharkov direction. But as I said before, I don't believe that we will see now large-scale Russian offensive in any of the sectors, in any of the directions. Only after Kyiv regime forces will collapse and Kyiv regime itself will be on the edge of capitulating or will capitulate. But still, Kyiv regime is afraid, and they are removing people from Kharkov region. There was mandatory evacuations from Sumy, Chernigov regions also previously. And I remind you, dear friends, that like in previous updates, I shared with you information about Kyiv regime forces attempt to mine fields in Kherson direction. They are mining whatever they can, just about everywhere. RIA Novosti is reporting that Zelensky demanded from EU, Ukraine to join this organization, this so-called union, already in June, by the way, in 2 months' time. I don't know. This is crazy, and he is demanding. He is not asking or something. He is demanding that Ukraine should join EU in the June. Otherwise, Putin will take absence of Ukraine in European Union as a weakness of EU and NATO. Okay, that's quite an argument to scare Western ruling elites or to blackmail them. This is total nonsense. This individual is under heavy influence of I don't know, man, whatever powders he's using, but his statements are more and more inadequate, and statements of members of his inner circle also. We can clearly see it. For example, Kuleba was demanding Patriot air defense systems, isn't it? And he was openly saying that, Kyiv not gonna talk with the West no longer nicely. They will now act from position of power and will demand whatever they want from West. Okay, good luck with that. RIA Novosti is reporting that yesterday Putin and Lukashenko, presidents of Russia and Belarus, had a meeting. And during this meeting, Putin once again stated that Russia is open for negotiations, but for real negotiations, which will address all the issues, so that all the issues that provoke this conflict. to begin with. And Moscow never closed the door for negotiations. Point is that Moscow cannot spend time. Russian high-ranking officials are quite busy and they have no time to spend it on these delusional ideas of Zelensky, the so-called peace formula. Which is quite understandable, but if Western ruling elites are willing to discuss some serious topics to resolve this crisis, then Moscow is open for it. And same time, by the way, Putin commented on recent Russian strikes, massive strikes, missile and drone strikes on the military and logistics infrastructure of Kiev regime, including energo infrastructure, which is a part of logistics, obviously. And he says exactly that first of all, Russia had to retaliate for increased strikes on Russian civilians and Russian infrastructure, including energo infrastructure, by Kiev regime forces. And secondly, of course, energo grid of Ukraine is active part of Ukraine's military industrial complex, Ukraine's military infrastructure, and in the context of demilitarizing Kiev regime, energo facilities of Kiev regime had to be neutralized, and that's what Russian side is doing quite effectively. So that was comments from Russian president. Also, RT is reporting that Switzerland is to hold a referendum on Russia's sanctions. Quite interesting and somewhat surprising. I didn't expect this from Switzerland nowadays. Swiss activists backed by the country's top political party have filed a petition with enough signatures to trigger referendum that could enshrine Burns sorry, the offense phones are ringing there. Unbelievable, man. So, Swiss activists backed by the country's top political party have filed a petition with enough signatures to trigger a referendum that could enshrine Burns' neutrality in their constitution and potentially restore the country's economic ties with Moscow. The so-called Neutrality Initiative, signed by over 130,000 residents, for officially filed on Tuesday, according to Swiss Info, or Thursday, sorry. According to Swiss Info, the proposal would define Switzerland's neutrality as a perpetual and armed, and explicitly prohibit the country from joining any military or defense alliance unless directly attacked. The proposed constitutional amendment would also prevent the government from imposing or joining any form of non-military coercive measures and sanctions unless mandated by the UN Secretary Council. However, Bern would still reserve obligations to prevent circumvention of sanctions imposed by other states. I don't know what if referendum will take place, and I don't know how Swiss society will vote during that referendum, but Switzerland is no longer a neutral state, by the way, and I feel sorry for Swiss citizens that have not yet realized that. Russian Foreign Ministry was quite clear and direct that Russia no longer sees Switzerland as a neutral state, and one of the reasons why Russia will not participate in this upcoming so-called peace talk on Ukraine conference that is planned for this summer in Switzerland is that Moscow no longer sees Switzerland as a neutral state, and not just no longer see as a neutral state, but Switzerland is actually supporting Kiev regime and are member of anti-Russian coalition. Switzerland is a member of anti-Russian coalition. Switzerland joined all sanctions. Swiss weapons have been used against Russia. including to conduct terrorist attacks on Russian soil. So what we are talking about? What we are talking about? I can understand citizens of the Swiss that are not happy that their country lost world's respect as a neutral state, but it's just too late now. I don't think Swiss will ever regain or rebuild its reputation as a neutral state. It's not happening. So with this referendum or without it, you know, history of Swiss neutrality is finished. I don't think anybody will ever consider this country as a neutral again, which is quite unfortunate. Quite unfortunate. Even during the Cold War, Switzerland was managing to maintain its neutrality and gain significantly from that. But now it's part of anti-Russian coalition, and Swiss government put Switzerland in a list of enemies of Russia. That's how it is. RIA Novosti is reporting that FSB, by the way, Russia's security service, declassified some documents from 1943 about neutralizing extermination of basically French neo-Nazi war criminals that were fighting on behalf of Nazi Germany in Bryansk region. In this particular case, in Bryansk region, and well, I guess there are some details in this news. French POWs were sharing information about what they are doing, what their task is, what plans German army has in area and so on. But by declassifying this information, of course, Moscow is sending clear message to entire world, by the way, that there was a, I mean, if anybody no longer remembers or did not know, France was acting against Russia quite often, historically speaking, and even during the Second World War, when French nationals were participating in fighting against Soviet Union and in war crimes that was committed against Soviet people. If I'm not mistaken, and I spoke about this topic previously, isn't it, quite a number of times, I believe there was at least 2 SS divisions, by the way, that was filled with the French nationals. And SS divisions was most brutal, inhuman divisions that there was in German armed forces. Anyway, let's continue. RT is reporting that well, French Navy is preparing for a war, according to Admiral. I did not know that France still has admirals, man. They don't really have any capable fleet. Why they need admiral? But anyway, France has shifted its naval posture from intercepting drug traffickers and poachers to training for a conventional war. Rear Admiral Jacques Mallard has told Politico. Mallard commands France's only carrier battle group built around the nuclear-powered Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, which is, I mean, even worse than Russian aircraft carrier, by the way. Russian aircraft carrier is much older and is undergoing some modernization right now. And I never understood why Russia even needs aircraft carriers. I mean, helicopter carriers or large amphibious warships, okay, I can understand that. But aircraft carriers, I mean, really? But whatever the case, by the way, whatever the case, French leadership, including military leadership, continue to brag about, you know, and I don't know what impression they want to create worldwide, but I mean, they cannot be taken seriously, man. That's the impression that I have, at least. Those clowns cannot be taken seriously, man. And when it comes to this aircraft carrier group, it's just one nuke, and that's it. One nuke, by the way, and there is no more this aircraft carrier group or whatever that garbage is. Simple as that. So, I mean, this so-called admiral can prepare their personnel for certain deaths as much as he wants. Who cares, man? I used to have some respect for France, but after actions of French leadership, you know what? France is no longer existing to me personally. RT's report, and I'm so happy that states in Africa kick out French forces and will continue to do so, because you know, French political leadership definitely needs some reality check. Those criminals and mass murderers. RT is reporting that Russian military instructors deployed in Niger. To continue this topic, by the way, Macron gonna be very happy about it, isn't it? Macron and his husband, or whatever the situation there is there. So a Russian military cargo plane has brought a team of instructors and various equipment to assist the Nigerian army with the counter-terrorism training, according to West African nations media reports. And this is great, by the way. Of course, Niger's army needs to be trained in counter-terrorism operations to deal with the French terrorists, undoubtedly. Foreign Legion, that's the name of this French terrorist organization, Foreign Legion. All of them should be exterminated, undoubtedly, everywhere on this planet. And Russian armed forces quite successfully doing so on the battlefield in Ukraine. And hundreds of those terrorists from French Legion or Foreign Legion have already been killed as a, you know what. TASS news agency is reporting that FSB neutralized terrorist that was planning to conduct an attack on one of their synagogues in Moscow. This terrorist was from one of the Central Asian republic, and during their operation he tried to resist. He had weapons on him, and Russian officers neutralized that terrorist. RT is reporting that Serbia will not be blackmailed into adopting the Western line regarding the Ukraine conflict and imposing sanctions on Moscow, President Alexander Vucic said on Tuesday. Well, very same Macron, by the way, this hybrid, this disgraceful animal was negotiating with Vucic recently, isn't it? And trying to persuade him to join this anti-Russian coalition, but he failed. This Russophobic animal failed and will fail always. And trust me, Macron will pay very heavy. He already pays very heavy price, by the way. I mean, he was punished from, you know, for a while now by being such a disgraceful individual, brainless, disgraceful animal. But life will continue to punish this sick bastard. As I said, by the way, no respect to anybody from leadership of France ever. They are our enemies and should be neutralized by all means necessary. I have no respect or any mercy for my enemies, man. And if you are my enemy, then you know. TASS news agencies report that Wall Street Journal is reporting that Iran may conduct a retaliatory strike on Israel in between 24 and 48 hours. Yesterday, Bloomberg was reporting about it, and Bloomberg also was saying 24 to 48 hours. Something is wrong with these media outlets. They should cooperate with each other and come up with one nonsensical information, because all these newspapers always saying that they source, I mean, unnamed sources told them, and usually they are always wrong. And I guess this Wall Street Journal also has no idea what will Iran do and when, and if Iran will do anything at all. They have no idea. They have no clue, by the way. They are just lying to their audiences, that's all. But when it comes to Iran's possible retaliation, well, it might happen and probably will happen. The only question is on which scale. And for example, yet another Western so-called media outlet, Axios, is reporting that Iran's response will be ограничен. Just a sec. Will be limited. Iran's response will be limited, not to allow Netanyahu's regime to engulf the entire Middle East into a fire of the regional war. Maybe that's quite logical. And if you remember in previous updates, I was saying that friendly nations to Iran, Russia, China, India, BRICS member states, by the way, in general, South Africa, Brazil. Of course, they will probably conduct some talks with Iran's officials and probably will recommend to conduct limited retaliatory strikes, to not go on a full scale because someone has to be adult in the room, and in this particular case, it's Iran's leadership, because Netanyahu and his government definitely cannot be taken as adequate and responsible people. It is what it is. And to make sure that entire region will not end up in a war, Iran probably will take quite limited action. But retaliatory most likely will happen, that's for sure. And on the BRICS topics, I will end this update on this information that according to RT's information, which is based on article in Izvestia, another Russian media outlet, Vietnam is actively working on a bid to join the BRICS economic group. Izvestia newspaper has reported citing Hanoi's embassy in Russia. So this is official position of Vietnam. And I mentioned this information yesterday during the second update on my Patreon during the headlines also. And I will just add that of course it will be beneficial for both parties, for BRICS and for Vietnam, if Vietnam will become a member of the BRICS, because it's one of the fastest growing economies in the region and has huge potential. And after all, by the way, we should always keep in mind that Moscow had, since forever, had the great relationships with Hanoi, isn't it? So it is what it is, man. I will end this update now. Quite long update, but hopefully you will find it informative and interesting and useful. And if so, please click that like button. Leave some commentary just about anything, any topic will do. This is the only way we can somehow at least try to influence algorithm, likes and comments, to reach wider audience. And for very same reason, if you can please share links to my videos or my channels with your friends on any of the platforms that you are actively using. And finally, if you think this channel is interesting, useful, informative, maybe even entertaining time to time, and has some potential or deserves to exist, please consider to support my work with small donations through PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. You can see all the links under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. This is it for now. Have a great day and take care.